John Lewis, who we all know lived a full life dedicated to making good trouble and protecting and strengthening our freedom to vote. So we're here not only to honor his legacy, but also to recommit ourselves to his life's work of strengthening the freedom to vote and making sure that every person in this country, regardless of race, zip code, income level, has access to the ballot. So really appreciate you all being here today. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers. To get us started, I'm going to pass it over and introduce Nisha Hernandez, our county legislator.
First of all, I want to say thank you for taking the time out of your day to come here today and to support the public citizen. This is a well-needed rally. We are under attack right now. So I'm kind of going to set the tone for you and let you know, give you a little bit of history. 4 years have passed since the loss of Congressman John Lewis, a titan of the civil rights movement, a tireless champion of justice. His legacy as a courageous leader, a dedicated public servant, and an unwavering voice for equality continues to inspire us all. We must honor his memory by carrying forward his work, striving for a more just and equitable society, and never giving up on his fight for what is right. I was able to hear him speak in 2019 at the Black Congressional Convention. His words were relevant then, and they stay relevant today in 2024, as we all know, right? Right. We are currently in a redistricting war to fight to make sure our districts in Onondaga County are fair and just. Your vote, yes, because you're fighting hard for that, and your vote is under attack. We must allow the voters to choose their elected officials and not the other way around.
Yeah.
As marchers left Salem, they were stopped by Alabama state troopers, sheriffs, deputies, and a citizen posse. The troopers wearing gas masks and carrying nightsticks, billy clubs, bully whips, and tear gas attacked the unarmed marchers. That violent response on the national televised captured the brutality of the struggles for African American voting rights. Guess what? All of our rights are under attack today.
Yes, we are.
Not just mine, but all of our rights are under attack today. And the scenario is seen over and over again on social media. We are still under police brutality. More than 15 marchers were hospitalized for injuries, including Congressman John Lewis, who suffered a skull fracture. The event galvanized the civil rights movement, and today we are still in a civil rights war. Tell me about it, right? We are fighting for our rights today, 2024, as we stand here and honor this great man. I, Onondaga County legislator, stand here today as not only an elected official, but as a Black Latino woman, as a mother of 3 Black children, as an activist, as a human, and I beg you to vote. Our lives are under attack. Our democracy, our rights, our freedoms is at risk once again. And I know this is nonpartisan, but once again. And we will be the first on the chopping board. All women. Woman, I'm speaking to you. We are powerful. We mobilize. Get out, yes. Mobilize your partners, your husbands, your children, and get them out to vote. We must secure our voting rights for all people. My God, we must continue good trouble.
That's right.
Thank you. Beautifully said. We're here today to, again, continue to fight for our freedom to vote. So when I think about the fight for our freedom to vote and this effort, one organization that always comes to mind is the League of Women Voters. Thank you, League members, for being here, and I'm really glad to have Mayor Kuhn here to speak on their behalf.
Good morning. Well, I
wear a lot of different hats, but today I'm wearing the hat of I'm on the board of the League of Women Voters, Syracuse Metro. So the League is a nonpartisan organization, and it's rooted in the movement that brought the women's right to vote. But since then has worked to foster civic engagement and enhance access to the vote for all citizens since 1920. This year, the League has a motto which is called Making Democracy Work. And by that, they're talking about ensuring a free, fair, and accessible electoral system to all eligible voters. The League is focused on the passage of the John Lewis Voting Rights Act because access to the vote is nonpartisan. So, a little sidebar, the other thing the League is working on this year is one vote, one person, the elimination of the Electoral College.
Woo!
A little sidebar. In 2013, the Supreme Court invalidated the section of the 65 Voting Rights Act that required states and local governments to obtain federal preclearance or permission to change any laws or practices that relate to voting. The court says, the Supreme said, that this section was outdated and that Congress should come up with a modern-day formula that protects voting rights. So just for a little bit of context, between 1962 and 2006, I believe, the Department of Justice blocked over 700 voting changes that they found to be discriminatory. However, apparently that wasn't enough. So, following the direction from the court to have the Congress enact a new law, that's what the John Lewis Voting Rights Act is about. So it is a modern-day formula that protects voting rights.
Turned up.
Since Shelby, can I turn something on?
Christine.
Since
There we go.
hello.
Yeah.
Since Shelby, the John Lewis Voting Rights Act has been introduced in every session of Congress and has yet to pass. It's important to note that a decade after the court gutted the preclearance protection, at least 29 states have passed over 43 laws that make it hardest for people of color and other marginalized voters to vote. So we are way past time to get this bill passed in Congress because every citizen in this country has the right to have their voice heard through voting. We must challenge our congressional representative, Brandon Williams, to support this legislation.
That's right.
Let me tell you a little story. 2 weeks ago, I was in D.C. to attend the League of Women Voters National Conference. And so one of the things that we did is several of us from New York who are represented by Williams made an appointment on the Hill to talk with him. Of course, he wasn't available despite the fact we had an appointment. But two of his young staffers were there and were willing to talk with us. They said they didn't know much about this. And one of them said, gee, I thought the Voting Rights Act passed a long time ago. So we weren't sure if they were acting dumb, like Williams does, or if they were really dumb. In any case, this told me how very important it is to constantly, even daily, bombard Williams' office demanding that he support the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, and ask him, by the way, why don't you support free and fair access to the ballot for every citizen in this country?
That's right.
Thank you, Mary. All right, so we're hearing a lot today about the threats facing our democracy, the continued threats facing our democracy. But because of many of the people here today and countless people who are not here, we have made progress in New York State, and I feel optimistic that we are going to make progress federally as well. But just to take a moment to talk about our progress here in New York, I'm excited to introduce Eric Vandervoort, Legislative Director, of State Senator Rachel May, who's been a champion for us.
Rachel May. So I'm obviously not the senator. She is at a glamorous event right now in Cayuga County called the Great American Manure Show, because it's a dairy country, and there's another word for it you could probably imagine that people refer to it as more colloquially. But so the glamours of state legislative life never cease. But I'm going to start on a personal note, because I moved to New York in 2011 to do my PhD. And when I came here, I moved from Indiana, not a particularly progressive state by any way, shape, or form. But I was accustomed to early voting. So when voting started, and I'm a political scientist, so like I should know. I didn't. I was like, oh, I'm going to go early vote. No, you're not. Not in New York State. You're not going to early vote. You're not going to have access to an absentee ballot. You're not going to have easier voter registration. You're not going to have a reasonable deadline to change your party registration if you want to. On and on and on and on and on. New York had some of the worst voting laws in the country for a blue state in particular. And that's partially because Republicans controlled the state Senate for years and years. We took care of that. Thank you. It's also because Andrew Cuomo was not really a friend of people voting. We took care of that. And along the way, we also did a number of reforms through the state Senate and through the Assembly. So when we took this, when the Senate flipped to the Democrats in 2019, the very first votes that we took were early voting, were automatic voter registration, all kinds of things. And in the Senate, we've continued that tradition. We continue with the first voting day that we have every year, as long as our majority is in charge, is going to be Democracy Day, where we vote on a variety of things. The Assembly doesn't always pick up the more progressive things that the Senate is pushing, so you can always ask our friends in the Assembly to step their game up a little bit. I've got a number of bills that I can highlight for anybody who wants to. But this is all to say, and our Senate elections chair is Eleanor Myrie, who is currently the senator, might one day be something else. I don't know. Yes. I heard at least Mary. I know it's a nonpartisan event, but I'm not nonpartisan. He always talks about going from worst to first. And it's relevant to this today because New York State, we had a Voting Rights Act proposal out there because, as Mary pointed out, the Shelby County decision gutted the Voting Rights Act. The Supreme Court continues to do so. And at some point, they're just going to throw out, I mean, God knows what the Roberts Court is going to do next. Although it's not really the Roberts Court anymore. It's more of the Alito Court. Anyway, 2 years ago, New York State passed the John Lewis Voting Rights Act to instantiate many of the same protections that existed at the federal level once upon a time to ensure that there would not be disparate impact on racial or other minority communities, that the courts could enforce, that there are a number of provisions, and there are also things related to redistricting that we did, so that helps to put a little more oomph in the county legislature's thing, because what they did was racial gerrymandering right here in Onondaga County
100%.
to diffuse the city's votes, to make everybody love the suburbs, which we love the suburbs. They just don't need to have more voting power than people who live in the city. So New York State is leading the way right now. We are not yet the best in the nation. We are not first, but we are on our way. And every year we see early voting gets more popular, more people are using it, it's reliable, it's accessible. We continue to expand access to the ballot at a time when the federal government is at best lazy and at worst actively hostile to the very idea that people should be able to vote on who they want to have lead them. So we're really happy that at least in New York State, we are able to stand as a bulwark for our citizens. We cannot do that under a federal constitution and under a Supreme Court that is hostile to the very fundamental dynamic of voting rights, which is why we need to honor the legacy of Mr. Lewis, and which is why we need to pass this damn bill already.
Yeah.
So, we'll keep doing what we can. Thanks.
Thanks, Eric. Senator May has been such a champion in the Senate at strengthening our freedom to vote here in New York State. And now it's up to all of us to continue building momentum to get this done federally. And we are particularly powerful. We're outside of the office of U.S. Senator Schumer, the majority leader, who also has been a champion on this bill. But unfortunately, we haven't been able to get it over the finish line yet. So one thing that we're working hard to do is to build towards that moment when we can overcome the filibuster, which we often call the Jim Crow filibuster because it has a history of being used to block the passage of civil rights legislation. It's an extremely undemocratic Senate rule. But we need to build towards that moment. We can overcome the filibuster and pass the Freedom to Vote Act, the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Native American Voting Rights Act, and then, of course, D.C. statehood, because they deserve the 600,000 people who deserve fair representation as well. And one thing we really try to emphasize is why this is so important is because, as we all know, our access to fair representation and our democracy determines our ability to make progress on the issues that all of us care about, whether it's climate change, reproductive justice, gun violence prevention. We need a functioning democracy where our voices can be heard and where our elected officials are beholden to us in order to have a say in the decisions that shape our lives and communities. So that being said, I'm really excited to be joined today by a community leader that all of us know and love, Cliff Ryan from OGs Against Gun Violence.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here and come and support. And I want to talk a little bit about my experience just recently when I went to go cast my vote. And this was challenged. And normally I have a good voting experience. I go, I cast my vote electronically, and I feel really, really good that I've done my service as an American by casting my vote. This time at the early polling station, that was challenged. And the individual didn't make me feel welcome. He didn't make me feel important. And my vote was challenged in a way that if I didn't know what my rights were, I would have walked away from the polling station. Okay? And I was a little upset about that, but I knew what my rights were, and I was able to navigate through that challenge that this person was imposing on me, which was pertaining to my address. Okay? And I got the situation straightened out, and I was able to cast my vote. But if I didn't know what my rights were, and if I didn't know any better, if I didn't have education on voting and what those rights were, I could have easily been discouraged and walked away or turned away from casting my vote. I support the John Lewis Act 100%. I stand here with you in solidarity 100% because it's important, especially in today's day and time. We saw what they did at the Capitol. We know what that looked like, and we know what we're up against this coming election. It's very important to get people to the polls to vote. And I just want to let you know that I stand with you 100%. There's nothing you can't ask of me in regards to showing all of the candidates that support us and support this.
Right.
We need to support them 100%. I stand with you in supporting them 100%. And it's very important that we get out here and let people know and teach the young people about the importance of voting. Because there's a lot of naysayers, there's a lot of negative narratives as far as voting is concerned. And we need to put to rest a lot of those stereotypes, and we need to encourage people to cast their vote. I stand with you 100%. I understand what's at stake. Thank you for having me, and I stand here with you 100%. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Cliff. All right. Cliff mentioned the importance of knowing our rights and continuing to advocate for what is right, for what is just, and for particularly the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, but also just for strong voting rights for all of us. And when I think of people in our community who keep us updated on what's happening, keep us educated on our rights and on potential bills we could be advocating for, one person that always comes to mind is, of course, Tom Keck. So I'm excited to have Seen My Solidarity Coalition here and Tom Keck to speak and represent them.
Thanks, Christine. When I think of somebody who's been out in the community informing us of our rights and reminding us of all, I think of Christine Wood.
That's right.
So, thanks everybody for coming out today. So, yeah, I don't know, some of us, maybe all of us, have been out here a lot of times, right? It can be frustrating, right? It's not like we're asking for the world, right? We are out here asking the federal government to protect the right to vote.
Yeah.
What, like, how many times do we got to be here? Like, it is frustrating. I get it, but I feel you. I'm glad you're all here with me. I don't care how many times it's going to take. We're going to keep coming out until they do it, right?
Yeah. That's right.
So, the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act, the Freedom to Vote Act, the Native American Voting Act, the D.C. Statehood Act, gerrymandering reform, all of those, right? Every time you talk to somebody who represents you at the federal level, democracy reform, democracy reform, democracy reform. There's lots of other stuff to talk about too, right? But like, make sure you get that in there, right? Make sure that they never lose sight of how important those reforms are to us here in the community. Now, so all of that, John Lewis Voting Rights Act, all of that. What I want to say just a couple more words about here is the Supreme Court. Right? So, for a couple reasons. One reason, of course, if you know me, is that I always talk about the Supreme Court. But reason number two is, as you already heard a little bit from Eric and from Christine and others, and from Mary, like, one of the reasons we got to be out here today is because of this current Supreme Court. Right? I mean, John Lewis and all those other heroes marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and LBJ signed the Voting Rights Act of 1965, right? I mean, that was like a historic achievement. It's one of the best things Congress has ever done in its history that provided fundamental guarantees of voting rights for 50 years until this Supreme Court started chipping away at it, right? Shelby County versus Holder. Shelby County versus Holder is the main case that a couple of folks have already mentioned, but it's case after case after case, right? Repeatedly, this Supreme Court has issued decisions undermining voting rights. Like, what is that? Right? It's the Supreme Court of the United States. They're supposed to be the highest guardians of our Constitution and our law, and they are not only not doing anything to protect voting rights, they are undermining voting rights. What is that? That is undemocratic, it is unacceptable, it is unfair, it is un-American, and it has got to stop. And we got to keep being loud until it stops. It is corruption, right? We know some of them seem to be bought and paid for. That is one of the problems. All right, second reason why I thought it was worthwhile saying a little bit more about the Supreme Court today is, you may have seen this news, right? Sometime in the next few weeks, right? President Joe Biden is going to announce a package of court reforms. Right? This is a long time coming. It's overdue. Some of us are like, oh, why didn't you do it already? Right? All right, but it's a good thing when it happens, right? So President Biden, reports say this week that he is working on, the details aren't quite finalized, but he is working on a package of court reforms that's going to be announced in the coming weeks. The details can get complicated sometimes. Right? If it comes out and there's something you don't understand, you want to know more about, just shoot me an email or something, right? We can talk. Right? The details get complicated sometimes, but the basic principles are super clear, right? The justices should not be corrupt, right? They should not be accepting gifts and not reporting them from their, like, billionaire friends, right? There should be an enforceable ethics code that applies to the justices of the Supreme Court. That is pretty clear, right? We are not asking for the world. That obviously should be federal law. Term limits, right? The details get complicated here, but the justices should not serve for 35 years. What is that? Right? Clarence Thomas was nominated to the Supreme Court when I was in college. I am 53 years old. Right? What is that? That is too long. There is literally no plausible democratic justification for somebody exercising power over us like that for 3+ decades. So I don't care what the number is. A lot of people are floating 18 years. Whatever it is, it should be something way shorter than forever. Yeah. Right? It should not be up to the justices to stay in charge of our country as long as they want to. Right? That's got to get fixed, right? There's lots of other proposals floating out there. We'll see what gets in there in Biden's proposal. At the moment, the specific details aren't that important because we can't enact it right at this very moment because we got a Republican House. So what's important at the moment is that President Biden will be joining our call to do something about this undemocratic Supreme Court. And so every time, right, I know we've been doing it for years already, but every time you talk to one of your elected representatives, make sure you are talking to them about democracy reform, and make sure you are reminding them that court reform is democracy reform, and that has got to be in there. Thank you, everyone.
I just had the need to answer a question that Tom just asked. What is this about? And I would speculate, I'm not saying, but I'm speculating that what we're talking about, what was gutted, has affected mostly people of color throughout the country for centuries. And they moved to make DC a state. Why has that been marginalized? What's the percentage of people of color in DC? Huge. So we know why. I speculate, but I think I'm right. That's all.
Thank you, Mary. And you all might have noticed a lot of misinformation floating out there these days about fraud. It's a continuation of the big lie. And what we're seeing is as they are weaponizing the big lie to pass restrictive anti-voter bills across the country and justify this effort to crack down on our freedom to vote. And as Mary said, it is predominantly impacting communities of color, older people, young voters. So we all need to come together and continue to advocate for Congress to take action and to pass these reforms. And we've come a long way. Because of our advocacy together, the Freedom to Vote Act is S1 in the Senate, which means it is the top priority bill. And I've seen with my own eyes Leader Jeffries and Majority Leader Schumer commit that if they have control of the House and the Senate and the presidency in the next administration, the Freedom to Vote Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act will be one of the first things that they move to pass. So our advocacy is working. These bills are bold, they are sweeping. Not only will they restore the Voting Rights Act and prevent and protect our freedom to vote, but they go so much further in expanding our right to vote and our access to the ballot, banning racial and partisan gerrymandering, and so much more. So I so appreciate you all being with us in this movement to pass these reforms, to realize the true promise of American democracy that we have yet to realize in our lifetime, where every person has a voice. So it wouldn't be a rally if we didn't do a chant, if we didn't do a call to action. So let's end on show me what democracy looks like. And you'll say, this is what democracy looks like. All right? Show me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
Show me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
Show me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
Show me what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like.
This is what democracy looks like. All of us coming together to call on our elected leaders to fulfill the will of the people and to pass these bills that we know are so important to not only all of us as individuals, but to all of us collectively and to our country and to our communities. So thank you all so much for being here. I'm going to encourage folks to join us behind this beautiful banner that we've created to join us for one last photo. Thank you all again so much for being here. And as Tom said, let's continue to be loud and mention this every time we're meeting with our elected officials. Thank you all so much.